Welcome to Jack's Detective Story, where you get to be the detective and solve the case alongside our protagonist, the skilled private investigator Jack. In this video, we'll follow Jack as he's hired to investigate a mysterious crime that has shaken the city. We'll see how Jack uses his keen sense of observation, deduction skills, and experience to gather clues, interview suspects, and uncover the truth behind the crime. But he can't do it alone, and that's where you come in. Pay attention to the details, think critically, and see if you can solve the case before Jack does. Are you ready to put your detective skills to the test? Let's dive into the story. Chapter 1: The Crime Scene. Jack arrived at the crime scene just after midnight. As a seasoned detective, he knew that the first few hours of an investigation were crucial. He surveyed the area, taking note of everything he saw. The victim, a young woman in her mid-20s, lay motionless on the ground. Her face was contorted in pain, and there was a large wound on her forehead. Jack knelt down beside her, careful not to disturb any evidence. The crime scene was in a small park, surrounded by trees and bushes. There were no witnesses in sight, but Jack knew that someone must have seen or heard something. He started to question anyone who happened to be nearby, looking for any clues that could help solve the case. Jack's team arrived shortly after he did, and they began to gather evidence. They combed through the area, searching for anything that could help identify the killer. They found a few footprints and a piece of torn fabric near the victim's body, but it was too early to say if they were related to the crime. As the night wore on, Jack became more determined than ever to solve the case. He knew that he had a long road ahead of him, but he was ready to do whatever it took to find the killer and bring them to justice. Chapter 2: The Suspects. The next morning, Jack sat in his office, staring at the evidence board. He had been up all night, analyzing the clues and trying to piece together what had happened in the park. As he looked at the evidence, he realized that he had several suspects. He called in his team and began to go through the list of potential perpetrators. The first suspect was the victim's ex-boyfriend. Jack discovered that they had broken up recently and that the ex had been seen near the park around the time of the murder. However, the ex had an alibi for the time of the crime. The second suspect was a local drug dealer. Jack had heard rumors that the victim had been buying drugs from this dealer and that they had a heated argument a few days prior. However, the dealer also had an alibi for the night of the murder. The third suspect was the victim's coworker. Jack discovered that they had been in a dispute over a promotion at work, and that the coworker had been seen in the area around the time of the murder. However, the coworker denied any involvement in the crime. As Jack went through each suspect, he realized that he needed more evidence to narrow down the list. He instructed his team to investigate each suspect more thoroughly, looking for anything that could tie them to the crime. As the investigation continued, Jack knew that he had to keep his mind sharp and his instincts honed. He was determined to catch the killer and bring them to justice, no matter what it took. Chapter 3: The Clues. After the discovery of the body, Jack had gathered his team and started the investigation. They had interviewed the hotel staff, but none of them had seen or heard anything suspicious. They checked the security cameras, but they were all turned off. It seemed like they were dealing with a professional. As Jack was walking out of the hotel, he saw a homeless man sitting outside. He approached him and asked if he had seen anything unusual. The man was reluctant to talk at first, but after Jack gave him some money, he finally opened up. The homeless man told Jack that he had seen a black van parked outside the hotel early in the morning. He couldn't see the license plate, but he remembered the driver had a scar on his left cheek. Jack thanked him and took note of the information. Later that day, They received a call from a witness who claimed to have seen a man wearing a black hoodie and jeans running away from the hotel around the time of the murder. Jack and his team immediately went to the scene and started searching for clues. They found a discarded black hoodie in a nearby alleyway, which they sent to the lab for DNA testing. They also found a set of footprints leading away from the hotel, which they followed to a nearby parking garage. There, they found a car with a broken taillight that matched the description of the black van the homeless man had seen. Jack and his team had gathered some promising clues, but they still had a long way to go. They knew they needed to be careful and not jump to any conclusions too quickly. They decided to continue the investigation the following day and went home to get some rest. Chapter 4. Jack sat in his office, staring at the board filled with notes and clues. His mind was racing as he tried to piece everything together. Suddenly, he had an epiphany. He grabbed his coat and headed out of the office. He went straight to the crime scene and met with the officers who had been guarding it. They told him that they had found a clue that could lead to the culprit's identity. It was a strand of hair that didn't belong to the victim. Jack immediately knew who the culprit was. He rushed to the suspect's house, but they weren't there. He asked the neighbors if they had seen anything, but they were all tight-lipped. Just as he was about to give up, he saw the suspect walking down the street. He approached them and asked them to come to the station for questioning. At the station, Jack interrogated the suspect. They denied any involvement in the crime, but Jack could tell they were lying. He pressed them harder, and eventually, they broke down and confessed to the murder. It turned out that the suspect had been in love with the victim, but the victim had rejected their advances. In a fit of rage, the suspect had killed them. Jack had solved the case, but it was a bitter victory. He couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness for the victim and the suspect. He had solved the mystery, but at what cost? As Jack left the station, he knew that this case would stay with him forever. He had learned that sometimes, even the most unexpected people could be capable of committing the most heinous crimes. Thank you for watching Jack's detective story. We hope you enjoyed following along with Jack's investigation and trying to solve the case yourself. In the end, it was up to you to decide who the real culprit was. Let us know in the comments if you were able to solve the case before Jack did. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more thrilling stories from Jack's adventures as a detective.